Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and on behalf of the Village of Cary and the Board of Zoning, Planning, and Appeals, I'd like to hereby call this meeting to order on this Thursday, September the 8th, 2022. Time is approximately 7 p.m., and we have a quorum of members, and at this time, I'd like to ask our Director of Community Development, Mr. Brian Simmons, to please call the roll.
Williams?
Here.
Kretschmer?
Here.
Graziano?
Here.
Jasper?
Here.
Nats?
Here.
Laughlin?
Here.
Bonnie?
Here.
Corey?
Here. Ladies and gentlemen, we invite you to rise with us for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. Thank you very much, everybody. So I'm not sure who to direct my first comment to, but I'll say generically the law enforcement community. I know some of you are familiar with our process, but I'll step everybody through the process so that there's some level of alignment of what we're going to do tonight. And I think Mr. Price might be actually speaking on behalf of the petitioner, if I recall. So the way this works, everyone, is that Mr. Simmons will give us an overview of the application. And then upon conclusion, some of the members of the ZPA may have questions for Mr. Simmons. Once we close that portion of the meeting, we'll invite Mr. Price to provide additional comments or color to the application. Again, members of the ZPA may have some questions for Mr. Price or members of the law enforcement community. Once we close that portion of the meeting, I know a number of you are assembled here. We do have a public comment section of our meeting. I saw you signing in the sign-in sheet, so thank you very much. For those of you that are unaware, we record the proceedings tonight, so the people that are not here tonight can see it at a future date. When you approach the podium, if you would kindly state your name and address for the record, that will be humbly appreciated. So thank you very much in advance. For those of you who have not done this before, it's not like you would see on TV like a court proceeding. You ask a question and we give you a response. It's not that way. Or you ask a question to the petitioner and they respond back to you. It's not that way. It's designed for public comment. However, what we will do is that as we're taking public comment, we'll ask the petitioner to catalog the questions and give them an opportunity to offer rebuttal upon conclusion of the public comments. That's typically what we do. So that's the process. And then upon conclusion of the public comment portion, we close the meeting. We take it back in-house. There might be some additional discussion amongst the ZPA members. We take a vote on the application, and then that vote gets delivered back to our elected officials. That's the actual process. So before we move forward on one quick administrative matter, does anyone have any comments or questions on the process? It's pretty straightforward. So with that, gentlemen, in your packet, you would have received the meeting minutes from our last meeting of August the 11th, 2022. And before I ask for a voice vote on approval, does anyone have any comments or concerns around those? They were pretty straightforward as well. So via voice vote, those in favor of approving the meeting minutes for ZPA 07001, that was the 232 West Main Street for a variance to increase the maximum ground floor area of an accessory detached garage, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen. At this time, I will call Village Case 22 ZPA 08001. This is for the County of McHenry, Illinois, and this is related to a request for a conditional use permit for the proposed new construction of the McHenry County Joint Firing Range to be located at the current Village of Cary Public Works property, and any other relief required from the Unified Development Ordinance for this project. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Simmons for an overview.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The request this evening, as mentioned, is for a conditional use for a proposed gun range for the McHenry County Joint Firing Range that will be located at the Village of Cary Public Works property down in Carywood Circle in the Cary Point Industrial Park. Given a brief overview of the property is zoned M Limited Manufacturing, which would allow gun ranges as conditional uses. The proposed facility would be an indoor-only facility and would operate with all activities being inside. They're having a hard time hearing you. Oh, sorry. Sorry, I'm battling the cold. Battling the cold, too. So the approval is requested this evening as a conditional use for the proposed facility. Brief history of the property was annexed into the Village of Cary back in 1973 as part of the Cary Point Industrial Park, and has been utilized as a Cary Public Works operations since that time period. Under the proposals this evening, the petitioner is seeking to construct a new 11,700 square foot building on the property. Under the M zoning district classification, the required building setback along Carywood Circle is required a minimum of 30 feet. The proposed structure will be set back at least 300 feet from that roadway, so it will exceed code requirements. This facility will be utilized for police training purposes only. It would not be open to the general public for use. Due to the arrangement with the facility will be owned by McHenry County, but we'll have multiple partnering organizations in the use of that, which would include the Village of Cary and other local police jurisdictions. There are no other changes that are proposed to the existing use of the Public Works property. Public Works would continue to be located on the property and utilizing it for their existing operations. There'll be a new facility that will be proposed on the northeast corner of their property, or their parking lot, as you enter in and off of Carywood Circle. This slide shows the proposed site plans. Again, it's roughly a 12,000 square foot building. It will extend the existing parking lot, which is located on the east side of the Public Works main offices. It will add additional 20 spaces for that facility to be utilized for individuals that are frequenting that facility for either training purposes or fire ranges. This slide shows the proposed building elevations. As the way the building has been designed, it'll closely match the existing Public Works facility in architectural style as far as materials and color scheme. And it will be constructed in a manner that it'll be slightly recessed into a hillside that is existing on the property. As you can see by the west elevation, as you travel from the right-hand side of that image, my cursor to pop up. The right-hand side of the west elevation would be at grade, main entry point into the building. As you travel further to the west, it'll be more and more recessed into the ground, which would be the portion of the building where the firing range would be located at. As you can see by the floor plan on the right-hand side of that image, there will be some general offices and training rooms that will be available for police training purposes with the firing range in the back of the structure. As with any use that's proposed within the village that requires conditional use approval, there are various standards that need to be met within the Unified Development Ordinance, which are summarized on this slide. In general, the use will not be detrimental to or endanger the public health, safety, morals, or general welfare. The use will not substantially diminish or impair the values of property within the immediate vicinity. The use will not impede the normal orderly development of surrounding property, will not contribute to an overburdening of municipal services, and the use will be consistent with the policies and future land use maps in the comprehensive plan. The petitioner has provided in the packet response to the standards and how they believe that the proposed facility will comply with those conditional use standards. So the petitioners here this evening, they can provide additional commentary as far as the operation of the facility and how it's been designed as far as architectural quality and noise mitigation. But should the ZPA, in this case, determine that the various standards have been met for conditional use, is recommended that the ZPA recommend approval of a motion to approve a conditional use for a gun range for the McHenry County Joint Firing Range to be located at 460 Carywood Circle, subject to the conditions that are listed in the staff report. I'll be happy to answer any questions the ZPA may have at this time, but the petitioners here can provide additional commentary on the application as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Simmons. Gentlemen, questions for Mr. Simmons?
I have two, actually. First off, in our our front page, it says to be located on Cary property and on any other relief from Unified Development Ordinance as may be required. Then we just open up the checkbook there to let them do whatever they want.
That's when we do a public notice, that's always in our public notices, that
Okay.
language, just in case there are items that change during the zoning process.
During the
or
zoning
they-
process.
they
Okay, it's the
cover-
first time I've noticed it, so I was just like, ah.
No, it's typical with our public notices that we do include that language, just in case there's a change that requires, if there's commentary at this meeting that requires a modification that reduces or creates another variation, it might not require going out for public notice.
Gotcha. And then, I guess my only other question was, because I didn't have a chance to research it, the amount of parking is fine for the space?
Correct, it complies with our code
Go ahead,
requirements.
thank you.
Was it the intent of McHenry County to not allow the public into this? Is that how they presented the proposal?
Yeah, the petitioner can provide more information as far as how the facility would be operated, but it was intended to be just for police services, it would not for general public use.
So within our conditions, we absolutely put that down in writing. Is there a reason for that?
It certainly can be a condition if the board wanted to add that as a condition, but have the petitioner.
Well, it
provide-
is added.
It's,
Mhm.
it's number 2.
It is, yeah.
On the conditions, page
Yep.
4.
Just, okay.
I'll leave it for the petitioner, but I would assume more likely than not, just wanted to leave it to professional services and not to the public. Don't want to run a gun range.
Well, I'm just, if that's not part of their proposal, but that's fine.
Other questions, gentlemen? So, Mr. Simmons, I know there's a number of people that were contacted, and I know there's a few people that sent emails, and just to be transparent with everyone, I'm personally aware that a number of people have contacted Mr. Simmons. There's a number of emails that are part of this package that'll be entered into the exhibit as part of tonight's presentation. So if any of you are here that wrote those emails, rest assured they're now part of our package and part of the overall process this evening. So I just wanted to make that clear to everybody in case someone's physically here that sent an email, because I know one gentleman isn't. He's out of town. All right, so with that, unless there's other questions from the ZPA committee here, we'll ask Mr. Price. Maybe you can offer some additional comments or color to the application that you think is appropriate.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm also battling a cold, so please bear with me. Board members, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. If you could slide. Just a brief overview, not to repeat what a great job Mr. Simmons has done in framing this project, but we are locating on the Cary Public Works site, just to the northeast corner. Next slide, please. As shown here in this slide. Next slide, please. This is a three-dimensional rendition of what our proposed will look like to meet the standards and comply with existing buildings on the site. Kind of blend with the architectural style and not create something that looks, analogous. Next slide, please. It's a little hard to see here, but the gray with the red lines is actually how deep we are burying the range building into the ground. The range building, the actual portion of the range, is going to be constructed out of 1 foot thick concrete walls with 3 inches of spray insulation and baffled ceilings inside to reduce the noise, both inside and outside the building. We're using an insulation type that has been tested and trued in multiple ranges we've done across the state and across the country. So we're very confident that the noise concern will be not a concern. The building is constructed with durable materials, and we expect it to last 50 plus years. Next slide, please. Oh, that's it. Okay, let's go back then. Within this proposal of the approximately 12,000 square foot facility, we have an exterior mechanical yard, which is shown to the left of the long rectangular building. That exterior mechanical yard also has acoustical panels inside and made out of concrete walls as well to keep any sound from the mechanical units enclosed and not being transferred out. So with that, the building is fully secured. We have a security system. It is cameraed, and there is a key card gate access that will be installed to make it as secure and safe as possible. With that, Brian, I mean, I think you kind of went through everything else. If there's any, I don't want to waste people's time by me up here, but if there is any other questions, we're happy to answer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Price. So, gentlemen, questions for Mr. Price?
Where are you currently conducting this training?
I would have to send that to the sheriff's office. I'm the architect. I'm not conducting the training.
So this facility is going to be multi-jurisdictional. So, I'm sorry, my name is Bill Prim. I'm the sheriff of McHenry County. So, and I live in Cary, 260 Stonegate, if that matters.
Welcome.
So I do appreciate people's concerns because it's been in my home for 30 years. But with that said, this training is not going on, okay? 5 or 6 years ago, we were approached by a consortium of the village managers, the county administrator, and various mayors saying that we needed to come together with joint services and what's the biggest need that law enforcement has. And our office, along with the chiefs, said training. It's where we can get the most value and quite honestly save the most money. As this new legislation came about, it even became more imperative. And by us training together and being able to utilize joint resources and assets, as well as have consistency with our training in order to hit the state mandates, we're going to be able to provide a much better product for the citizens that we serve. We're going to be much more consistent with our responses. We're going to mitigate whatever liabilities might occur, particularly as it comes to firearms, and we can hit all our state requirements and mandates. But what we can do is we can utilize Cary's range officer to train a singular McHenry County deputy if he can step in on the range. If we're having a range day, we can bring in Algonquin. Right now, we have 5 committed groups. It's the Sheriff's Office, the Village of Cary, Lake in the Hills, McHenry, and Algonquin. So we're going to make up the principal board. We're going to expand it to the other agencies. They're all interested, and I'm certain that they will come on board. But in order for us to be able to function, in order for us to hit the training mandates now that came up with this new Safety Act, this bill that came out, takes effect on January 1st, it's incumbent upon us to come up with ways that we can do this and do this efficiently, cost effective. They're going to require an additional 30 hours of scenario-based training per officer, which is very, very expensive, particularly when you're talking about groups that work nights or weekends or holidays or overnights. This will allow us to bring those people in, do their qualifications on duty instead of having to give someone a day off that's on midnights to come in and do a 2-hour qualification course and then give him 8 hours off again before he needs to come back to work. So we'll be much more efficient and it'll be much more cost savings and quite honestly, it'll provide a significantly better service. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, other questions?
Please. First off, from what you've just said, am I clear in that this is owned by McHenry County, however, available to any state of Illinois law enforcement agency?
So the principal users are going to be people that sign on to be the partners, okay? The building itself
But they
is,
could be, I mean, you could get somebody from Lake County, somebody from
we could,
King County.
depending on the
Yeah, okay.
availability.
I just want
Yeah.
to be clear on that.
Yeah, depending on the availability, we want to service the McHenry County law enforcement agencies first. And if there's sufficient space and time in that scheduling, yeah, we certainly would engage other law enforcement agencies as well.
Is there an armory on the facility?
No,
So there's no storage of ammunition,
we're not storing guns.
firearms?
The guns won't be stored there. There'll be a small amount of ammunition that's stored there just for training purposes.
Thank you, Mr. Jasper. Thank you, Mr. Prim. Gentlemen, other questions?
I was just curious, what is hours of operation? Like, are you guys gonna be starting at 7 a.m., 6 a.m.?
So.
Just out of curiosity.
No, well, it's a fair question. But the advantage to us doing this is we want to be able to train 365 days a year, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. So if we have people that are on midnight shift, they get to go and they get to train on duty. So we don't have to backfill, we don't have to pay overtime, we don't have to try to figure out how we're gonna staff our shifts. We want the ability to go in because we work irregular hours, to utilize the range at irregular times. One of the principal reasons that we want to make sure that it's law enforcement only is because we are cognizant of the traffic, and we are cognizant of the uses, and we're not trying to generate a significant amount of traffic into that area. And I'm assuming, I like seeing a police car drive by my house, makes me feel good. Yeah, I'm assuming once they get past the idea of that law enforcement is in that arena for a specific purpose, there'll be a certain comfort level that comes with that as well.
What are the employee ratio or there are gonna be employees there full-time? If you're 365, 24/7, are there anybody full-time working there? Or is it just kind of come in, do your thing and?
So it'll be predicated with the schedule, and it's gonna be based on the municipal departments and the sheriff's office needs, right? So we'll schedule range days for sheriff's personnel. But again, if Chief Finland has a guy that he needs to get qualified, we can sneak him in, or two guys. So there's no specific individual that's going to be assigned there on a regular basis. The scheduling, the administrative tasks, those are all gonna be absorbed by the sheriff's office.
Who's responsible for security? He had mentioned,
Oh, I'm sorry, Pat. Did I throw you under the bus on that one?
he had mentioned that there would be security cameras.
There will be.
key
So
cards.
we'll.
Who's responsible for that? Who monitors that?
We will. The sheriff's office inevitably will do the camera monitoring and that type of response. Obviously, we're hoping to have people in and out of there on a fairly regular basis, and that should ward off any people that have any interest in going in there. I'm confident that Carrie spends some time in there, just in that industrial park per se, as well as into the townhouses. It's just part of their normal patrol, so.
What is the maximum capacity of the building?
So the classroom itself can house 40 people. The classroom, or the classes that we're anticipating holding there are all going to be range and firearm related. So the maximum capacity would be 40. It's gonna be 10 lanes, so you could have 10 shooters, along with at least one, if not two, range masters.
Anything else, gentlemen?
Question for the architect.
Sure.
You had talked about the construction and soundproofing and such.
Yes, sir.
But you didn't say anything about the actual sound outside the building.
So there is an ordinance requirement for, I believe it's 50 decibels at the property line. So with the techniques that we're using in the range, the wall construction, the width, the depth of the wall, plus the insulation on the interior, and the continuous insulation that is also energy code required, we're confident that we're going to be much less than 50 at that property line, just because we're set back so far and we're basically holding the sound inside.
And if you're not, what do you end up doing?
I'm sorry.
Said if you're not, if you end up being 75 decibels at the property line, what do you have to do, or what would you do?
Well, we would mitigate that to meet code. We would add more insulation, but we've done this enough to know that we're specifying the appropriate amount of soundproofing. The insulation that we're using is a sound-absorbing insulation. And also by the fact of burying the building into the ground, and we're basically putting it in a hillside, which is reflective there. I'm not gonna give a physics lesson, but sounds obviously goes in waves, and it's going to be absorbed in the mass of the material and the ground. So I don't, the other portion of it is the classrooms and the training facility itself is in front of the range towards the residential side of the site. So it would have, the sound would have to travel through a foot thick of concrete, all the insulation, and about 56 feet of walled off space, the exterior wall, and then 300 feet to the property line. So very confident that the sound will be negligible.
Does an acoustical engineer basically stamp the plans?
We have not used an acoustical engineer, but the acoustical engineers design the materials and they test the materials. So we are using their recommended materials to do this.
So, I'm sorry. So you haven't worked with a sound engineer for the sound attenuation? Just to, because, sometimes that the materials themselves work, but when you put them as a whole system, if there's like a little gap, if there's something with the windows, the sound is just gonna come right through that and come out. So,
I
have you?
absolutely understand. I understand what you're saying. But we're, a lot of how the acoustics in buildings work is based on tested assemblies. Okay, tested wall assemblies. We are far exceeding all of those tested assemblies by the UL laboratories in what we're specifying. So if there is a breach in the system itself, it's most likely due to constructability or how it was put together, which would be mitigated at the time of, if there's a gap in the sealant, if there's a gap in the window that would cause some type of sound transmission, that would be remediated.
Mr.
Absolutely.
Price, maybe I could ask the question a different way.
Sure.
Do you have experience of building these fire ranges somewhere else?
Yes, sir.
And have you had a problem with?
No, sir.
Thank you.
No, sir. And if I may add, we have also retrofitted existing facilities closer to residential to residential neighborhoods with great effect. So not even the entire whole system, taking like a 2 or 3 white brick wall, spraying this insulation, putting in our Acustamats and the sound baffles, spraying the ceiling, and that has reduced the sound significantly.
Gentlemen, additional questions? So, Mr. Price, I have one for you. I don't know if this gets approved or not, but assuming it does.
Yes, sir.
Obviously, there needs to be some construction, so can you describe that process for this committee in terms of, there's gonna be noise, and then there's gonna be a timeline associated with it, so I don't even pretend to know what your timeline is. But if you could try to walk us through what that looks like, that'll be helpful.
Absolutely. So, there will be some construction practices noise. Just we're building a new building. Basically, what'll happen is we will degrub the site, which essentially means we're going out, taking the plants and all of the organic material there to start to prep for our building foundations. We'll be digging into the hillside because we are putting the building in. Foundations will be poured. We're using CA7 for drainage. We're doing dual French drains inside and outside, so there should be any water mitigation or to mitigate any kind of hydrostatic pressure on that. Basically, the force of groundwater on the underside of the slab and the foundations and footings. So we are basically belt and suspendering that so we don't have any issues. Site utilities will go in, and then we will start to build the building. Now, due to the construction of the building with the poured in place, what will happen is you will see formworks go up. You will pour the slab, or the walls, I'm sorry. We'll pull the formwork off, and then we will kind of backfill again to get that grading for the side of the hill. Because I can't just take it and shove it in there. I have to clear it out, build it, and then we would refill it back in to grade it like we're proposing. Finished materials would go on the exterior, and then we would do the basic, make the building weather tight, and then work on the interior work. What is our duration on 14 months? So, if approved and through permit review and all that, we have about a 12 to 14 month construction schedule.
Thank you.
The entire schedule will not have that loud equipment noise. You know, once we get in the building, obviously that noise produces.
Thank you, Mr.
Yes, sir.
Price. All right, folks, so Mr. Jasper has one more
For
question
Mr.
for you.
For Mr. Simmons, is there any plan to do any testing of sound, test that ordinance before signing off on the final construction?
There's no plan to test at this point. Essentially, as the buildings would be designed, we have to comply with the ordinances when it's built. So if there's a problem that we identify when it's built, that would be, if it exceeds the code requirement, they would have to modify the structure to bring it back into compliance. So there would be no testing or a way to test it beforehand.
All right, well, thank you, Mr. Jasper. Thank you, Mr. Simmons. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the time where we open it up to public comment. For those of you that are interested in commenting, we invite you to approach the podium and, again, just state your name and address for the record. Thank you. It's not going to necessarily be, I'm going to point to someone. Whoever wants to speak, just stand up and approach the podium.
Hi, my name is Ralph Lamay, L-A-M-A-Y. I live at 2115 Root Lane in Cary, which is Root Springs subdivision, located adjacent to the area that you're going to build in. Many years ago, there was a gun range on Volts Road in Carpentersville. All right, that range was measured straight line, a little over 9 miles from my house, but you could distinctly hear the noise from that range. Now, this site will be about a half mile from my house, so I'm quite sure the noise from there would be very invasive. So for that reason, I would hope you would deny this request. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lemay.
My name is Judd Erickson. I live in Cary Woods. And when I first heard about this, I thought, oh my God, the noise. So I went to On Target, because I'd been there before, and I went inside, looked at the inside retail area, and I didn't go to the range, but I went outside and I start backing off from the sidewall 100 feet at a time. And at 200 feet, the noise was quite loud. Pop, 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 pop. At 400 feet, it was still loud, but not as loud. At 600 feet, there was still a noise, and I thought, well, what's it like for Cary Woods? Well, I walked it off from the curb at 401 to the front door of the what do you call that building?
Public Works?
The what?
Public Works.
The what?
The Public Works building?
Okay, Public Works building is 250 feet. And I guess the range is gonna be on the far side. But I'm really concerned about the noise. I know I heard about the new design and the walls and all that, but all I know is what I heard, and I hope you can take this into consideration for the tenants or the residents of Cary Woods, period. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Erickson.
Good evening. My name is Peter Spizzeri, 308 Sterling Circle. I do not live next to this property, and I do hear what the other folks are saying. I like this concept a great deal. I support this concept a great deal. What we have seen too many times in the United States in recent years, recent months, are situations where we've learned over and over that in policing, what you need is what you need before you need it. This building would help us coordinate multiple jurisdictions, multiple police departments to be very familiar with Cary. We're very fortunate that we haven't had anything like this occur. When you see what happened in Highland Park, when you see what has happened in certain schools, it's worrisome. So how do we help protect every citizen and how do we protect our children, and this kind of facility helps many police departments be familiar with Cary. They would respond quicker and easier with their interactions with our police department and with the Chief Prim's folks as well, and that part appeals to me. Again, I do need to take a step back and say, I don't live near this, but the worst problem is active failure to train for many police departments. That in the future, for example, because we're at the southeast corner of McHenry County, would that let us have the Barrington Police Department come in? Would Chief Dave Dorn's people come in? Would maybe a former Cary Police Chief from Buffalo Grove bring his folks in? Would we get people from Lake County in because we're in such a good geographic location? The intelligence of that makes sense to me. Ongoing skills, training, and knowledge really speak to the complexity of modern policing. I don't believe I could be a police officer. I love the idea. I grew up loving the idea. Of course, I'm also 5'4", and I know they don't have height requirements anymore. But against a 300-pound guy, I really don't want to be a police officer anymore. One of the things that we keep hearing for police officers is situational training, that this classroom is there and that they could have up to 40 officers interacting is really a positive thing. I've gone through our Cary Citizens Police Academy. There have been, 6 or 8 classes of 10 to 15 or so folks. So you've had maybe 50 to 100 people in Cary that care so much about the police department that they gave up, like a third of their year nights to come in once a week and learn more. So I'm pleased that Cary is a leader in McHenry County for this necessary police training. I do agree that more police on the street, one way or the other, 24/7 does mean more safety for Cary. We don't really think about police this way, but honestly, for the businesses in Cary, especially the restaurants, for example, those businesses will be positively impacted with their revenue streams. Police officers eat a lot. I don't know what you think, but I know this. I guess that's really it. For the folks that live by this, I hear what they're saying. I can't speak to that, but I can tell you from the rest of the story, the conditional if-then logic. If something goes wrong, I'd much rather have some background noise in some ways versus a lack of training, a lack of ability to respond. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Hello, my name is David Hall, 2105 Hillside. Is it possible that I could prevail and ask one of those maps to be put up, the first map that you showed? that
Sure.
Showed the property with Cary Woods Circle, that one right there. So if you look directly where that building is going to be built, it's lining right up with our community, which is just off the bottom edge of that map where it shows the townhomes. And my biggest concern is noise. I've been to On Target. I've been to many gun ranges. As a matter of fact, I've shot target and skeet, and I know what it sounds like. There is got to be something going on where somebody would actually consider siting this building right where there's residential property. There's also the people that live up on High Street or High Road over here on the other side of Spring Street. They're elevated. All that sound is going to come right through the roof of that building, and they're going to hear it. When I heard 365 24/7, that's alarm bells. Where we live, this is a natural amphitheater down by the river. And the sounds carry down there like you cannot believe. I don't believe that was taken into consideration. If it was, then this would not be built here. If I hear one gun report, you failed. This cannot generate noise. I don't want to hear about decibels. I don't want to hear about property lines, because this sound is going to be reports from shotguns, from long rifles, and pistols. Pistols are one thing, and I'm sure that people have been to On Target and heard the pistols, but if you've ever heard the report of a shotgun or a long rifle, and it's going to be done in rapid fire succession. They're going to be doing training like they're at a law enforcement, like they need to train. And I'm here to support the police, but this could be built anywhere else. There are hundreds of communities that would be glad to have this in their, they want the cops to come there, they want this. But in a downtown Cary, you're literally in downtown Cary proposing something that's going to generate noise, which you're gonna bother your constituents, and you will be known as the people who allowed the gun range in, decrease the property values at the townhomes. And if I'm laying awake at 11:30 at night and I hear a gun report on a Friday night, for what purpose could that serve to bother the people that live in Cary? I'm flabbergasted that this was even proposed when the whole west side of Route 31 could be, a gun range could be built. There's industrial parks and there's public works buildings all over the McHenry County area that would be glad to have this put in their area, where there aren't any houses that could be even reasonably considered. Now, up at On Target, I went and talked to the guys up there. They're still getting complaints from a neighbor north of their property who was actively fighting it because he thought there would be noise, and he's still experiencing noise. You can go up there and talk to him. There's a noise complaint issued. However, the wind is blowing to his property and the noises, he still hears it, and to this day will make a request for somebody to go over there and tell them that he can hear the reports. Let's see here. The main thing is to say that I would reconsider the hours of operation. 7 to 5. Let's make it like a business. It's an industrial park. Let's make them stick with what would be normal consideration for the people that live in that area. If they can't do their service, their training, they should be able to do it. They rotate on a schedule, so they're 3 months on, 3 months off, however they work their rotation. They don't need to come at night at 1:30 in the morning to start doing training. Maybe they do. From my point of view, that should be required to work within a standard hours so that people aren't bothered living their lives quietly. I'm gonna be retiring soon. I live so many hundred feet away from there, and I just sincerely hope that you will reconsider this proposal. As far as I'm concerned, it went on too far, that it got to architectural renderings. You guys, this is improper for this spot. It shouldn't be here, and God bless the police. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. So,
hi, gentlemen. I'm really surprised to not see any women on the board here, but.
we've had some
Have you?
before.
Good, that's good, that's good. I am Laura Sherwood, and I'm glad you have the map up because my building that I live in at 400 Cary Wood Circle is one of the closest to where the gun range is going to be put in, if it will. And I want to say, members of the sheriff, I totally support, I totally support training police officers and law enforcement officers. I do training for a living. I'm a professional development specialist. I know the importance of training. And with things that have gone on in the country and this whole, what the other gentleman was saying, who I think lives where my son lives, and I'm gonna have to look for him when I walk around his neighborhood. You know, this is not about whether or not it's needed. We need officers to be trained. I don't question that at all. It's a question of the location. This is a residential location. Yeah, it's zoned manufacturing, but that's because of the light manufacturing that is in the buildings along, I think that's Detroit Street. But where I live, where you first come into the townhomes, I am right there. And I'm concerned, especially concerned about the noise, even though what you have said about the insulation and all of that. But also, if it's gonna be open 24/7, that means traffic through my neighborhood right in front of my building 24/7. And I'll hear it. If I have my windows open, I hear the train, which is quite a ways up the hill. You know, when I'm out walking my dog in the evening, I hear the train. I can hear the restaurants downtown. They have outdoor eating now because, what street is that?
Spring Street.
What's that? Spring Street is closed there, and they have entertainment on the weekends. I can hear that. And I'm down Spring Street from that, but I can hear it because the noise bounces off of the buildings, you know? And so even if it's a muffled pop, 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 I don't want to hear that. And I don't want the young kids that are in the area. I see the kids out on the bus stop, you know, in the mornings. I don't want them to be hearing that. You know, this is a residential area also. And we already share the area with the industrial people, with the poop factory. You know, we have to have one more thing that we have to share? I don't think so. I think it needs a different location. You know, I'm behind the gun range. I think they need the training. They absolutely need the training, but not here. Find another location where it's not going to affect people that are living there and making it their home. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sherwood. So does anyone else from the public want to speak?
My name is Steve Schwartz, 2111 Grove. I live in the Root Springs subdivision, and though a number of people have talked about the noise, that's not what I want to talk about. My objection would be, I guess, the need to spend public funds on a facility like this when there are a number of existing gun ranges in the county that have training rooms, that are owned by private business people who pay taxes, as opposed to spending public funds for the construction, maintenance, and operation of a facility that can be handled by tax-paying private businesses who also pay real estate tax and not on a piece of public property. That's my objection to this. No offense, I know the police need training, but I'm pretty sure there's enough existing facilities in our county that can handle that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schwartz. So additional comment from the public?
Hi, my name is Lindsay Sawicki, and we live at 467 Cary Woods Circle. My concern is that we have, I know you said it was 50 decibels, but I would like to see the math, how much a rifle is. I mean, because we're still going to be able to hear it. We hear everything else that goes on in the neighborhood, and I'm just really concerned about our home values and our living in general. I think you would feel differently if it was across the street from your home, because it's literally, if you would walk across the street, it's right there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wicki. Additional comments from the public? So before I close this portion of the meeting, I'm going to give Mr. Price an opportunity, if he chooses to respond to any of those comments that you heard, Mr. Price, and if you don't choose to respond to them, that's your decision.
I'll try.
All right.
I don't know if we have each.
Well, we didn't catalog them. You might recall from the beginning of the meeting, I would say, and as a general comment,
The sound.
There was a noise comment.
It's the,
yeah.
the overarching comment. You know, without doing the math, because I'm not an acoustician, I'm an architect. All I can go by is the tested assemblies, and there's two numbers that we have to be concerned about. There's the STC, and there's the NRC, which is the noise reduction coefficient. STC, sound transmission class. This is what we deal with in all types of buildings, whether it's a housing development, party walls, or a gun range. In my experience, we are going over and above on the insulation, the situation that we have with the hillside, that we're able to encapsulate that sound so that sound wave is being absorbed into the mass. So the more mass you have, the greater the reduction of the sound, in kind of layman's terms, not to insult anyone. However, the roof will be insulated above and below, and then we're having fire baffles within the range. Now what that is doing is, if sound is a wave, it is dispersing that sound, so it's basically reducing that impact, which is the NRC, the tapping that you would hear. So that is the specific material that we are using on the walls that absorbs that pinging sound. Again, the only thing that I can offer is we have done this in numerous facilities around the country, in public safety, in areas with closer residential, in retrofits, in new construction, and we are taking we are taking the sound of this into consideration. We want to be good neighbors. So you're basically in an insulated box that is absorbing the sound and breaking the sound waves down. Now, in the event that there is an issue at the property line, which is what we have to comply with by the ordinance of 50 decibels, we will address that at such time. As I stated earlier, there may be a leak in the system, there may be something that wasn't installed correctly, numerous things that could happen. But the system as we are designing it should hold and absorb the sound. I think that was kind of the majority of the comments. I can address anything specifically.
Well, what I was going to suggest, Mr. Price, and I don't want to put Sheriff Prim or Chief Finland on the spot, but as part of public comment, if either gentleman wants to address any of the comments they heard, they're welcome to do so.
Thank you.
Okay, my safety net. So I do appreciate your comments, and I think your concerns are legitimate, so I don't want to minimize those. The selection of this site and being on this portion of the counties, because it's about 70% of the population and nearly 70% of the law enforcement community is in a small radius to this area. So I don't want to say convenience, but it's convenience that's a cost savings. It's convenience in that that's the maximum amount of people that have to move the minimal amount of space in order to accomplish the tasks that we need. And when we partnered with Cary and when we were looking for these sites, we looked for a manufacturing site. We looked for something that, I'll call it a sanitary waste handling facility, but you know, probably a little less desirable location, right, that we could locate in order to be a good neighbor. And when we talk about what we want to do with our training, there is no private range. We did look for private ranges, and I think that was a valid question. We did look for private ranges. There's no private range that fits and is suitable for the law enforcement community for the county as a whole. We looked at places further away. The problem that we have, again, is moving a maximum amount of people in a maximum time in the maximum space is a maximum cost, right? It's just ineffective for us. We also look for services. And as this gentleman pointed out about the utilization of the restaurants and the other facilities in here, because we are going to have another training facility that's more classroom-oriented. It does generate a certain amount of revenue, but more importantly, we have to service those individuals and students as well, right? In order for people to come in and utilize our product, and our product being training, and it's law enforcement, but it's a business nonetheless. So we're going to be able to provide that because of the proximity. If we go into a rural location, we're not going to be able to provide those services. So that was some of the thought process that went in. And as far as the shift work, we work permanent shifts. We bid once a year, and guys go. So our midnight shifts work. It's the most healthy way in order to maintain a solid workforce is to have consistency in your hours of work, right? So you don't continuously change your sleep cycles and patterns. So not only are we working a permanent shift, that is, if most of the agencies aren't already, are going to. So again, if we're going to train on duty and try to save taxpayers money and be prudent with our expenditures and train on duty, we have to train during the midnight shift. We don't have that luxury of waiting a month because most of us don't rotate like that.
Thank you very much.
Just to kind of dovetail.
I'm going to let Chief Finland make his comments, sir, and then if you're welcome to follow up.
Just to kind of dovetail on what Sheriff Prim indicated as it relates to shift assignment, all of us basically in McHenry County have collective bargaining agreements, and shifts are generally dictated by those collective bargaining agreements, so it's not something that we can tell somebody that they have to work a different shift because they have the ability to bid their shifts based on a collective bargaining agreement. Just to give some perspective in regards to that 50 decimal standard that we're using at the property line, 50 decibels, if I'm correct, is normal conversation. I don't know if that's the paradigm that I want to use here. That's the level that has to be reduced at the property line. So when we speak, we're speaking at 50, basically 50 decibels.
Chief, would you check your mic so for the recording? Thank you.
I guess they're not, you know what, I'll get up. They're not charged, sorry. That's technology.
I'll take it up with Mr. Simmons after the meeting, sir.
Please do,
Yeah.
please do. But 50 decimals is at the property line, that's normal conversation. I will tell you that I have had opportunities to use a dosimeter, an audio dosimeter in a previous assignment that I had as it related to an amusement park. And I will tell you that we had to identify planes going overhead because that affected that reading that we were having. And I will tell you that the planes overhead were louder than the amusement park that I was monitoring, number one. Number two, to address the issue related to where do we train? Where do we train? I will tell you that the Cary Police Department shoots at the Meyer Material Quarry, as does the Algonquin Police Department. And I will tell you that we get, it's outdoors, it's not indoors, so the attenuation of the sound is transmitted throughout that quarry, and we get complaints from Algonquin, Lake in the Hills, and Cary because we shoot at the quarry, as does Algonquin. I believe Lake in the Hills goes and shoots either at St. Charles or Schaumburg. In the winter, when we can't shoot outdoors, we shoot at Lake Zurich because they have, we have the ability to go to Lake Zurich. I believe that McHenry City shoots at a private range that's a private club. To my knowledge, there is no working range that is used by a police department within McHenry County. Not one agency has a range that's been built into their buildings. I've had a range when I was previously the chief of police in Lake Zurich. It was a 4-position range that was in our building, and we were adjacent to a townhouse development, and we never had any. We had more complaints about the generator that would run to power the building than we did our firearms range, and it was used around the clock as well. So those are things that I wanted to address in addition to, I believe the Public Works facility was there in 1973, and I don't know when the townhouse development was built, but I believe it was built after that. And I do think that this is a very good location for this range from a position of both it being located in a manufacturing area and its adjacency to both utilities that are available here and the fact that it's located in this quadrant. We did look at 4 different options before we landed here. One was in Heartland, and it was going to be a prefabricated facility, but there was no infrastructure to support it there. We looked at a private-public partnership in Woodstock, where we would retrofit a building in Woodstock, and that was going to be cost prohibitive. We did look at On Target, but again, we're going to be moving people because it's a tactical range, and it's not going to be a range like you have at a public target range where you move the targets, not the people. That's how we operate, is we operate when we move people. So this will be a tactical range, and what that will mean is that most of the activity will occur on the far north part of this building because that's where the trap, the firearms trap, will be located, and it will be, as the architect indicated, insulated by the topography that's at this building. So I think I hit most of the stuff. Is there any other questions that I missed?
I think that's very helpful, Chief.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Once again, I've been on target, I drove around the area. There's at least 1,000 feet or 1,500 feet to the closest residence. It's buried off of 176 north by about 3/4 of a mile. Next door is a ComEd facility, monstrous facility. In front is the grid, the electrical grid that goes around the United States. Then there's woods, I can't see beyond that. The other side is nothing except there's a little retail on 176, but it's nothing like this at all. If you'd have gone there and checked it all out, all the around on target, you'd have said, we'll never put a range in this location. I've been fighting this cutting off of Spring Street. That was ridiculous. That's another story. Down Spring Street, all the way to the river, is over 160 residences. And we're all going to hear the noise. So rethink the location, please.
Thank you. All right, folks. Okay.
My name's Paul Powers. I live at 404 Cary Woods. I want to thank you guys for opening it up to the public. Your presentation tonight was awesome. A lot of the questions that you asked, I also had concerns about, and I think most of my questions were answered. What I haven't heard is the price tag. Can you tell us how much this is going to cost?
Well, I'll try to comment on that. So the purview of this board is not to review that. Our job tonight is really to review the conditional use permit that's being asked.
Okay.
That falls out of the purview of this committee. Our elected officials would be really the appropriate party to discuss that with.
Okay, and the timeline after tonight's hearing, if it's approved, then when would your project begin approximately? What month?
Well, the way it would work is that if it is approved, and I don't know if it will be approved, but assuming it is approved, to answer your question, I would be telling the petitioner to coordinate with Mr. Simmons, and it would go before our elected officials, probably at their next meeting, which would probably be in a couple of weeks. That's my guess.
We do have a noise problem as it exists already in our neighborhood, mostly at the four-way stop sign at Spring Street coming down and Cary Woods. So all summer long, these Harleys with straight pipes, these Dodge Chargers, drag race up and down Spring Street. And it's really become more of a nuisance over the years. So I don't know, speaking of decibel levels, if there's a legal limit for car and motorcycle exhaust?
So, sir,
if there is a law?
I want to make sure we're staying true to the petition tonight. So
Yeah.
obviously Chief Finland's here. I think that's a different discussion that you're,
Right.
this is about the firing range,
Yeah. I
and
was
that's a different discussion.
addressing noise in the neighborhood. There's already quite a bit of it. So to project this additional noise and 50 decibels, 60 decibels at 3 a.m. is 50 decibels at 3 in the morning. If you're trying to sleep and there's 50 decibels of continual popping in the background, it might be something you might consider. I appreciate your time.
Sure. Thank you very much, Mr. Powers. And I would invite you, at your convenience, to maybe discuss that other issue with our chief. Okay, so before we close our public portion of this meeting, I want to give everybody the opportunity that's here, if you have other comments, before I close the public portion of the meeting. Okay, so I'm going to close the public portion of the meeting. Gentlemen, before I call the motion, I certainly want to give everybody on the committee an opportunity to offer additional comments.
Yeah, I have a couple questions for architect. Can I ask him a couple more? So you said that there's, systems designed for the sound. What's the roof construction for the building?
The roof construction?
Yeah.
So the roof construction is going to be heavy gauge steel beams to hold the baffles. It's going to be a barrier roof and then insulation metal deck.
It's gonna be like lightweight insulated concrete up there?
Yes.
How about the windows?
The windows will be energy efficient, commercially grade.
You could get, I know you can get like some windows that are good for sound. I know I've seen before, like almost like a 4-inch thick window.
Sure.
They could even help to keep airplane noise out of the way, so.
Well, if I may, the one thing just to answer, so the windows would be in the training is only along the front of where the classroom space would be. So the intensive noises are not, there's no windows in the range.
Right, right.
So it's really just along the classroom on that, the bottom of your page. there.
Mhm.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
they're
we can
1 inch
definitely
insulated, I'm just curious about the whole
Yeah,
construction.
they're,
of
they're
it, so.
I mean, they're insulated windows.
Mhm.
Um,
And one thing I don't, did you ever consider doing a sound, you know, a sound engineer do a report? Because obviously there's gonna be a lot of questions on sound. And that would have really helped if that would have come in, you could show, because they could tell you how loud it's gonna be inside the range. You got the wall construction, they could tell you how that would, you know, kill the sound. It would show how the sound is right outside the building, right at the property line. You know, because saying 50 decibels, no one really understands. Even saying
Sure,
it's your
absolutely.
conversation, it would be good to have some kind of measurement like that, because, I mean, you know that's gonna be the question, so I think that would have been really helpful.
The one thing that I'll, and I understand where you're coming from. The way that those work is, once it's built, an acquisition would come in and check it, okay? So depending on.
It seems a bit late.
Understood. but-
That's why I think, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but
Yeah, no.
I think it'd be great to have some kind of report ahead of time. Because I know they can do a lot of good measurements about that. They can have a good,
Understood.
especially with the construction, showing how it
Understood,
goes.
okay. Absolutely.
Oh, that's-
Was there another?
That's it.
The one thing that I will say about sound is everyone's tolerances for sound is different. So we could provide a report saying you're gonna have 40 decibels at the property line, or 5 decibels, or 0, which obviously is the wind blowing, so it's, you know, people's tolerances for that sound are all going to vary. So I just want to keep that in mind. If we're meeting the code minimum, I don't know if just because of the use of the building, and I'm not discounting anyone at all. I don't think that the use of the building should impact the code requirement.
I mean, codes are minimum.
Sure.
So sometimes, you know, what meets code still isn't good enough.
No, absolutely, but to the chief's point, it's a conversation. You and I are talking at about a 50 decibel level. So that's all I'm trying to say. Thank you.
Mr. Krishmer, additional questions for the petitioner? No? Gentlemen, other questions?
Comment?
Comments? Sure, Mr. Jasper.
Maybe out of line, but I would like to admonish the owner, the petitioner, and the architect for not being prepared to address the sound levels. At least, very least, being able to demonstrate what 50 decibels is. We knew it was going to be a tough subject coming in. This is one meeting. This is going to another meeting. Consider yourselves forewarned. Prepared to demonstrate what 50 decibels is. You had mentioned that it was this level of conversation. As my understanding goes, we're over 50 decibels. We're approaching 55 or so in our conversations within this room. So 50 decibels at the property line shouldn't be a problem, because as you move away from the property line, the sound is going to be, even less, and that should be demonstrated as well to allay the fears of the citizens. And at the same point in time, I would think that we would, because of the sensitivity of this, that we would want to, as this goes into operation, to check that on a regular basis to make sure that we've accomplished what we set out to do, which was to keep the sound below 50 decibels outside of the owner's property.
Thank you, Mr. Jasper.
I too would like to comment. I want to echo those sentiments, and I do think it would have been prudent to have a acoustical engineer present. I do, based on your professionalism and your personal experience, I believe you when you say that 50 decibels is the equivalent of conversation, but having a acoustical engineer here to sort of certify that, if you will, I think would have been prudent.
Thank you, Mr. Nats. Mr. Williams?
Question for Brian. Do you know, what is Crystal Lake? So there was a lot of talk about the on target. What is Crystal Lake's variance? Is it the same, 50 decibels as well? Do you know?
I'm not familiar with their code.
I'm just curious, I don't know anybody else's code, so looking at where that is, I don't know if it's apples to apples.
Yeah, on average, almost every municipality or county has a 50 decibel at night limit.
Okay.
I mean, across the board, you're pretty much talking.
Yeah, and again, I've never been to on target, so I don't know if there's I know that this is getting buried into, so looking at the two pictures would be a very different building. Would that be accurate? I don't know.
The sound studies I've been a part of, the issue of 50 decibels at a property line comes into all ambient noises around it as well. So unless you can turn off everything around it except that building, it's hard to gauge, which is where you get into a person's perception of what sound
Right.
is. So.
And we've had the conversation regarding the car wash, right? I mean, we had that whole conversation
Yeah.
earlier, or whenever that was. So the other thing was, again, I think the police presence is a good thing. I would challenge anyone who said it wouldn't be. So the 24/7, I'm not huge fan of, but at the same time, the gentleman said that there were some challenges at late night. 24/7 might solve that problem if you have cops rolling by at 24/7 more often. But I think that sound, I think if we didn't have the sound, would we be sitting here talking as much? So I think the sound is the big one. If it was contained, I don't know, like, again, I would love to know, can you hear it? Can you hear it outside? If I'm sitting there, again, there's gonna be noise, there's gonna be kids, people, dogs, but I can hear the broken oar from my house, and I don't even live near the river. I can hear the train too, oddly enough. But that's when it's deadly quiet and, you know, it echoes. So I don't know if that problem will ever be solved, but.
Well, maybe I can try to address that a different way, Mr. Williams, because I appreciate the noise concern here. So, Mr. Simmons, can you pop up your screen again that shows the proximity of the townhomes to this? And for the benefit of everyone assembled here, could you just go back and identify, for everyone's benefit, Public Works, how it's zoned, and then the Cary Woods and how it's zoned, and its proximity to those two areas?
Certainly. So I'm looking at this aerial image, identifies obviously the Public Works property, is identified with the red hashing around the entire property. The Public Works site, in addition to the entire Cary Point Industrial Park, which is to both the north and west of the site, are zoned M, Limited Manufacturing District. So that district has the noise requirements installed within the code that would essentially establish what the maximum noise level could be at the property line of the 50 feet, or the 50 decibels. The Cary Woods subdivision, which is a primary discussion, or number of residents are here from this evening, is that subdivision just to the south of the Public Works property. That is zoned R3 multifamily. That property was originally part of the Cary Point Industrial Park when it was annexed into the village, but then was developed as a townhouse project in the early 2000s. So that, just from a historical perspective, but that's the separation between the two districts. You have essentially the manufacturing is the Public Works property, and to the north and east, and then the Cary Woods is R3 directly to the south, and then you have unincorporated single family in the Country Club to the west, and then there's additional single family just south of the Cary Woods Circle, or Cary Woods development that's unincorporated closer to the river as well.
Thank you, Mr. Simmons. So, gentlemen, I certainly want to give everyone here the opportunity to ask any questions that they choose. This is a new type of thing for us, obviously.
Does that mean I can't ask anymore?
You can absolutely ask as many times you want, Mr. Jasper. You know my point of view about that.
One item that came up, I didn't, I'll have to admit, didn't think of it walking into this room, but is the spent shells and pollution. Is there any information on that? And what are we doing with call it waste, the shells at the other end,
It'd be good-
or not the shells, but
It'd be an excellent question for the petitioner. They can provide that information as far as how the facility would be cleaned and serviced. I could have Chief, you want to answer it if possible? Sure.
So I don't think you mean spent shells.
I don't mean shells.
You meant the projectiles?
Projectiles.
Okay. So what is proposed, and if you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but it's gonna be a reclining grand trap? What that is a reclining grand trap means it's on an angle and it uses granular rubber, okay? So it encapsulates any round that is sent downrange. That also helps, by the way, with sound attenuation as well, because it's hitting a mound of rubber in essence, instead of a Venetian blind type of trap where it'd be more noise generated when a projectile hits that blind, number one. Number two, how you deal with that is we have annual maintenance. So the range would be shut down. They'll take the granular rubber out, they'll sift it through it, they'll collect it, and the people that collect that usually reclaim it and then recycle it, and then they put the existing granulated rubber back in, and then some more, because generally there's some shrinkage when that occurs. So there's gonna be annual maintenance as it relates to that, but I will tell you that having a reclining grand trap is probably the best option in regards to this use, because number one, it knocks down airborne lead, and we will have a very significant HVAC system that will be, I think, triple filtered with a HEPA filter on the end of it, so there'll be no airborne lead that goes outside the range, and it'll be recirculated, so there'll be additional air that comes back in to the range from that system. It's very similar from where I came from. I was told it's very similar to like an operating theater. So that's the type of air filtration that you'll see, and then the type of maintenance in regards to the reclining grand trap.
Realizing you're not an engineer, so I don't expect an absolute comment on this, but my guess is the pollution is less than the pollution at the current public works facility.
I couldn't say that, but I will tell you that most of the issue that comes out of shooting at a range is the airborne lead that is at the primer nowadays, because we use jacketed rounds, so the lead doesn't shave off as it goes down the barrels of the firearms.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Chief.
I'm actually done.
Are you sure, Mr. Jasper? Okay. So, gentlemen, before I call the motion, what I'm planning to do when I call the motion, just so you know, before someone moves, I'm going to read in the conditions so there's zero confusion about what we're wanting to approve tonight. So,
Point of order, Mr. Chairman?
please.
If we're gonna do conditions, reading through the four, I got no problem with. Should we be adding something with regard to the design matching the Public Works building, which we've talked about, but that's not listed here. We talk about noise and all that. Architect, or appearance, aesthetics.
So if I can offer a comment, I appreciate the comment, Mr. Graziano. How about if we call the motion, we'll read in the four, and then if you want to add a fifth, we'll see if everybody's in alignment, and we'll add the fifth, if that's what you want to do.
I haven't formed that yet.
All right. All right, gentlemen, so unless there's other comments or questions, Mr. Graziano, Mr. Williams?
One more. Can you confirm, Brian, the plant down there, the Public Works, is that always generating sound and working? I don't travel there at all times, but.
The plant is a 24-hour facility, so the operations of the sanitation facility is constantly working in that facility. They might have more activity during the daylight hours when more shifts are on for facility and maintenance workers that are there, but for the most part, the sanitation facility operates 24/7.
All right, gentlemen, so unless there's any other comments, I'm going to call the motion. So the chair will entertain a motion to recommend to the Village Board of Trustees approval of a conditional use for a gun range for the McHenry County Joint Firing Range to be located at 460 Cary Woods Circle, subject to the conditions in the staff report. And I'm going to read those out loud for everyone's benefit. The conditional use for a gun range shall be granted to the County of McHenry, Illinois, for the property located at 460 Cary Wood Circle. 2, the gun range shall be utilized solely for law enforcement training purposes and shall not be made available to the general public for use. 3, the building shall be constructed in a manner that shall minimize any potential adverse noise impacts on adjacent properties from the discharging of firearms within the structure. And 4, firearms may only be discharged within the proposed building structure. The discharge of firearms outside of the building elsewhere on the property for training purposes is prohibited.
Second.
Thank you, gentlemen. So before we go to a roll call, do we want to include another condition?
I proposed it, looking for comments from the rest of the board.
I'm not opposed to it, Mr. Graziano. I think I've got a lot of confidence in Mr. Simmons. He's been to this rodeo more than once. I'm pretty confident that what we saw here tonight is what's going to appear.
Yeah, I was thinking something to the nature of the building shall substantially be developed as shown in the architect. You know the wording, Brian.
Substantially conform to the plans and exhibits as
Yeah,
submitted. as
yeah,
part of
that's
the
the guy.
Is there a second for Mr. Graziano's request here?
I don't think we need it. I don't think we've done it, I don't see where we've done it in the past. On other things, it's up to the village to work with McHenry County to make sure the engineer and construction manager carry out their, I mean, it's just like the 50 decibel level. I mean, it's up to the village to enforce that. It's up to the village to enforce the building elevation.
Do the word redundancy mean anything to you?
There you go.
All right, that's a little inside baseball, folks. So, Mr. Graziano, are you comfortable with that? That's going to come out? All right. So, Mr. Simmons, unless there's any other ideas around a fifth, we're going to call the motion.
Just one more comment.
Please.
Just personal, I believe in engineering. I believe in people doing their job. I believe in our staff having gone over all this stuff. And our engineer obviously is reviewing the plans and the overall development. So I have confidence that due diligence is being done on our part.
Yeah, I would agree with that assessment, Mr. Graziano. All right, Mr. Simmons, would you call the roll?
Jasper?
Yes.
Nats?
Yes.
O'Laughlin?
Yes.
Williams?
Yes.
Kretschmer?
No.
Graziano?
Yes.
Corey?
Yes. So, Mr. Price, Sheriff Prim, Chief Finland, you have a favorable recommendation. So the way this works now, this will probably go on the consent agenda, but frankly, this is a different petition. This is the first time the Cary has seen something like this. So my personal experience with something like this is it may be pulled off and there'll be another conversation around this. And I think some of the comments you heard, particularly around noise, I think you'd be well served to try to address that as best you can for the next meeting. I would recommend that you stay in very close coordination with Mr. Simmons. He will be able to tell you very specifically when the meeting's going to occur. And I'm assuming that's a couple of weeks.
Correct. It would be at the next village board meeting, which is on September 20th. So it's 2 weeks from this past Tuesday.
All right, so before we adjourn, gentlemen, Mr. Simmons, did you have any updates regarding next meeting?
We will have at least one case on the next meeting, actually possibly two. So we will definitely have a meeting in October to discuss those projects. Would be our next meeting date on, I think, October 13th. if I'm not mistaken.
Very good, okay.
Boring, hopefully. Boring, hopefully.
There's actually two new developments that we'll have discussion, so it might be some decent conversation.
All right, gentlemen, unless there's anything else, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone. Good luck with the project.